Welcome everyone to the session on graduate school abroad, and we will get started. So first I will, my name is April Strad. I'm the Director of Study Abroad at Mount Holyoke College, and welcome you. And we have a panel of really interesting and diverse people to talk about different opportunities. And I will let them introduce themselves first, and then we will begin the panel.
I think I'm up first. So hi, my name's Corinne Morgan. I'm actually a graduate of Mount Holyoke College, class of 2013. I am a Green Griffin. I went and studied abroad while I was at Mount Holyoke, and I also did my master's, and I'm currently doing my doctorate in the UK, and also work at a UK university.
I guess I'm second. Hello, everyone from Switzerland. My name is Eliane Minassian. I'm deputy head of the student services at the Graduate Institute in Geneva. And I'm also head of the international programs at the Graduate Institute. I'm really pleased to be with you.
I will introduce myself. Hello, everybody. Thank you, April and Carrie, for inviting me and hosting this great event. My name is Casey Detro. I am the Information Officer at DAAD, which stands for Deutsche Akademische Austauschdienst, or in English, the German Academic Exchange Service. And I know that there was a video that the DAAD produced that was shown earlier this morning. As a part of today's events, and also that DAAD may have been mentioned in a different workshop, so you may have heard of us. If not, we're going to dive into more detail about what the DAAD offers you, particularly related to graduate study opportunities. So I look forward to sharing more during my presentation. Thanks so much.
Kia ora koutou. Hello everyone. My name is Lewis Gibson. I work for Education New Zealand. It's a New Zealand government agency responsible for international education in New Zealand and kind of taking New Zealand education to the world. I'm originally from Wellington, New Zealand. I'm based over here in Washington, DC, and excited to speak to you guys today. And if you have any questions for me in particular, happy to share my contact details and you guys can get in touch. Thanks for having me.
Hi everyone, my name is Michal. I'm in charge of the admission office at the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies. We have the longest name in the world for a school, the same school that Eliane works at as well. We are a graduate school. We only offer master and PhD programs in the social sciences. I think I'll get a chance to tell you a few more details about that in a few minutes. And we'll be very happy to take questions about our school, our programs, Geneva, and the experience of applying to and studying abroad in general. Really happy to be here, happy to meet you. There are so many of you, and that's really exciting. Thanks so much.
Session is being recorded and will be uploaded later with captions. If you don't wish to have your video on, that's fine. And later on, we'll be entertaining questions through the chat. Great, so I'll have Corinne kick it off for us. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. So I have nothing to share on my screen mostly. I just have my experience to share. So I'm here as an alum to talk about what my experience was studying abroad in the UK for my master's and also for my current graduate doctoral study. So a brief bit of history about me. When I went to Mount Holyoke, I was a double major in dance and biological sciences. And then I was a high school teacher, actually in Chicopee, Massachusetts for a while. And then I moved to the UK to pursue a master's in fine arts in creative practice and dance at Trinity Laval Conservatoire of Music and Dance. See, Michal, there are challenges to the length of name in the world. So in terms of what my experiences were when I first moved over to the UK. I think I'll talk about first the visa experience. I will say that moving to the UK, the school I was going to wasn't necessarily aware of what I needed to have as an international student. And it's not that they didn't know what needed to happen. It was more of a lack of understanding of the timeline that I needed to operate on and the cost that it was going to take for me to get over to the UK. Visas are not inexpensive. And I had some difficulties, I'm going to be honest. I got issued a CAS, which is a certificate for admission to the UK, and it had the wrong name on it. And then I sent it back and it came back to me and it had the wrong birth date on it. And then I sent it back and it came back to me, and that time it was right. And that was kind of where things come from. And that was my first introduction, I think, to my shock a bit with UK culture when I first came over, which is that bureaucracy is a bit of a mess in the UK. Not everybody knows what they're doing all the time. And there's a lot of different things that don't talk to one another in the way that they need to help international students. This isn't to dissuade you in any way from studying abroad. I'm going to talk about how great it is in a moment, but it's to explain that there are some challenges that will probably come up that are unexpected if you're looking at studying graduate school anywhere else outside of the US. And these are normal challenges that almost every international student faces. But I did come to the UK and I started my master's. And one thing that I think was very, very interesting for me as an educator is the difference in pedagogical styles between the US and the UK. In the US, it's very hands-on. At the schools you're at, you get a lot of face-to-face time with your professors. You get a lot of hands-on work. Well, not as much this year, but normally you get a lot of hands-on work. And it's a very high-touch environment. And at least in the UK, that's not the case. In the UK, it's much more of a focus on independent learning. And there's really no easy way to transition into that from the US to the UK. It's a bit of a shock to the system to go in and realize I'm paying a lot of money and I'm not getting as much face-to-face time. And I'm really being forced to learn in an independent way. But that's what's valued in that educational system. And listening to my peers who were international students when I was there at the same time, it was a serious struggle for them to go from not having class every day to not having an assignment they had to turn in every week, but realizing that, for example, their entire grade for a class is based on one exam or one paper 4 or 5 months in. And that's a big change. It's not a bad change, but it's a big change. Another thing that was really interesting for me was the grading system when I went to the UK. In the UK, if you get a 70 on a test or on an exam, you've done fantastically. That's an A. You should be celebrating. But of course, you get a 70 in the US and you might be like, oh, that didn't go as well as I thought it did. Okay, so adjusting and doing your research on what are the differences in the educational systems is really important to ease your transition, but also being fair to yourself and realizing that you probably won't know everything going in and there will be surprises and you should reach out for that support. But I will say, going through my master's was a huge growing experience for me as an academic. It got me to do the kind of research that I always wanted to do. It gave me the support that I wanted to do. I got to work with individuals of an amazing caliber. My master's research advisor had a PhD in maths and another PhD in music. I don't know where else I was going to find that. So the opportunities that you can find in studying abroad are just honestly fantastic. And having moved on to UCL now, I'm at University College London doing my doctorate in education. I've learned how to settle in and how to use that system and understand that creating those relationships with other academics is a huge part of going into graduate school anywhere in the world. And it's something that you will learn how to do and be forced to learn how to do in those countries. And the last thing I'll say before giving it over to the others who will tell you lots and lots of information about how do you get there and how can you afford to get there, is that getting to immerse yourself in another culture, if you haven't had a chance to do that, is worth every single penny. You will learn things about yourself. You will learn things about other people. You'll be introduced to things you never even knew existed by studying abroad. And I personally am a firm believer that everybody, if they have the opportunity, should take the advantage to pursue education in another country. It will only help you and it will only expand your perspective. Okay? And all of these people here are here to help you attain that perspective and attain that goal if that is what you have in your life. I'll be on the panel a little bit later. If you guys have any questions about my experience, I am an open book, both the good and the bad. So feel free to ask later. And otherwise, I'll pass it back to you, April.
I think that we are trying to remember who is next.
I am. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I've got a presentation that I will go through with you all. Can you just nod your heads if it is in full screen and looks good? Great, wonderful. So I'm going to jump in, and I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information, but I want to pique your interest and sort of bring your eyes toward Germany on the map and how Germany could be a great place for you, regardless of what academic field you're in, for graduate studies. So what is the DAAD? What is the Deutsche Akademische Austauschdienst? We have this really long name. What do? We are a national agency for international academic cooperation and exchange. We are government adjacent. We receive a significant amount of our annual budget from the German Foreign Ministry, as well as various other departments dealing with science and research and education. We are independent of universities, meaning that we fund universities and research initiatives. We fund students to go to universities, but we do not directly affiliate ourselves with a specific university. We go back to 1925. Our office in New York, where I used to work out of before the pandemic, has been here for 50 years. And we have 71 other regional offices around the world. We have an info point in San Francisco, and we also have an office in Toronto. In the interest of time, I'm just kind of going to zoom through this. Here you can see where DAAD exists around the world. All of these offices facilitate academic exchange as well as artistic exchange between their respective countries and Germany. Questions that you might have regarding going to grad school in Germany are, is the system the same? Will my credits be transferred? Will my application even be considered as a US American college graduate? Well, thanks to the Bologna Process, which took place a few years back, European higher education has largely been synchronized and adapted to the North American model, specifically the three-tier degree structure, which we use here in the States: bachelor, master, PhD. Germany adheres to this for many of their programs, if not mostly all. And so if you are a bachelor's student here in the US finishing up your last semester and you want to do a 4-semester master in Germany, you will fit into the framework that already exists. There are over 1,900 international degree programs taught in English in Germany, which is great if you're not fluent in German. And there is a strengthened quality assurance through the Bologna process. It also means that there's more competition between institutions, which is great because you're going to really be getting a high quality education. So the Bologna process has made our work at DAAD a lot easier compared to the way that the German university system was structured prior. Why Germany? Maybe some of you in the audience have been to Germany before. Maybe you've done a semester abroad. In that case, you don't really need my sales pitch here. But if you've never spent time in Germany and you know nothing about the German way of life or quality of life, I'm going to dive into that right now. Germany has really high academic standards as well as really high living standards at a fraction of the cost that we in the United States have. Now, I'm not German, I'm actually Luxembourgish. I'm also American. And I went to undergrad here in the States in New York City. My cost of living when I went to do my master's in Berlin was a very small percentage of my cost of living in New York. And my tuition at the Humboldt University of Berlin was essentially a couple €100 a semester, and that covered my unlimited Metro card, subway pass, and a few other on-campus student services, which there are really no tuition fees, and if there are tuition fees, they're very low, and they cover these necessities like public transportation, and maybe access to various printers on campus, things like that. Germany offers an outstanding research infrastructure. So if you are in the STEM fields, Germany is really a place that you might want to pinpoint on your map of places to look postgraduate, to conduct your research, to find a lab or a mentor to work in or under. Germany is home to almost 360,000 international university students, and we at DAAD have noticed that over the course of 2020, during the pandemic, the number of applicants to our scholarships and programs and the numbers of applicants to German universities from outside of Germany has skyrocketed. Going back to a figure I quoted on the last slide, Germany offers more than 1,900 international programs. Germany is conveniently located in the heart of Europe. Germany has a great language that is sort of a challenge to learn, but is really fun once you get the hang of it. And of course, if you choose to go to a place like Frankfurt or Munich or Berlin, or even Cologne, you don't necessarily have to be completely fluent in order to partake in everyday life in Germany. And Germany enables you access to a number of vibrant cultures. Germany is an ever diversifying nation, and it's also a really beautiful place, and a place that as a student you can have a lot of fun because that quality and standard of life is so high, but the cost is so low. German higher education is slightly different than here in the United States. The university system and the college system is not specifically one-to-one comparable to what we have in the United States. There are research universities, which include undergraduate, so bachelor degrees, and then professional and doctoral programs. And there are also universities of applied sciences, which in German are called Fachhochschulen. And these are practice-oriented bachelor's and master's programs. In Germany, across the board, you're not going to find a sort of nuanced attitude difference between a university and a Fachhochschule, a university of applied science. They're really looked at as equals across the board, and it really depends on you as an applicant and what your area of interest is that will determine which kind of institution you apply to. Germany also has outstanding research institutes aside from universities. And right here, I've named a few. And these institutes can also be degree granting institutions. So you could get a PhD at one of these research institutes, like the Max Planck Institute, if you are in, say, the STEM fields or in engineering. So I'm going to give you later a list of resources because I know I'm kind of offloading a lot of information. But there are a lot of websites that exist online that are sort of choose your own adventure like websites where you can plug in where you are with your academic career, where you'd like to go, what language you'd like to study in, and what your area of interest is. And these websites will sort of bring you to a number of various universities or research institutes that may be of interest to you. I just led myself to my next slide. Basically, these online searchable databases exist to help you because the German university system is not as transparently online the way the United States university system tends to be. So a lot of these websites exist specifically to attract international students. They're in English, and they help you to narrow down where it is you want to end up, what it is you want to do, and more importantly, how you might be able to fund that opportunity. I'm going to skip through this because I don't know necessarily how many of you in the room here are STEM specific. I think that my slideshow will be made available to you after this. I'm not sure. If not, I will give you my email address. You can contact me and I will give it to you. But this is a slide that's more specifically for folks who are looking to do science research in Germany. I want to fast forward to the heart of my presentation, which is DAAD's scholarships. So what are they for? How do you get one? And what do they include? Well, they are for funding study abroad, internships, or research. But what I'm going to go into in this presentation is our premier scholarship, which is the Graduate Study Scholarship. That is for the funding of your master's degree in Germany. It provides you with 4 semesters worth of funding, plus the ability to extend to pursue an MA. Our various funding opportunities are open to students in all fields. And for a lot of our programs and funding opportunities, and specifically for our Graduate Study Scholarship, previous knowledge of German is not required. It can be advantageous, but it is absolutely not required. In fact, I'm not going to go into detail in my presentation today about this. The DAAD does offer and fund summer opportunities to go to Germany and learn German before you begin a course of study. Our scholarships provide you with a monthly stipend or a lump sum and health insurance, which is an incredible thing in Germany, travel reimbursement, and all grantees meetings, meaning orientations, mid-year conferences, and sometimes end-of-year wrap-up end-of-year wrap-up meetings. There is a red squiggle on the screen that is not part of my presentation, so please don't think it's intentional, but I like it there. The study scholarship for graduates is what I want to go into detail today. For you here, it is, as I mentioned earlier, our scholarship that supports the pursuit of a master's degree at a German university. So it's for up to 2 years. It covers 4 semesters of study with the potential to extend during your thesis writing semester. So that could be a sort of half year beyond the 2 years of study. Your German language ability should be commensurate with needs, meaning if you're applying to a German language program, you need to show us at DAAD that you're at a C2 fluency level. If you're applying to an engineering MA that is conducted entirely in English, you don't need to prove to us that you speak German. You can apply in your final year of undergraduate study or in your year after undergraduate study, but you need to have completed almost all of your bachelor's degree in order to be eligible to apply. You can check our website for more specific details on who is eligible to apply. There is a stipulation, for example, that you can't have lived in Germany for more than 14 months at the time of applying, but that likely does not apply to the majority of you in the room. Our graduate study scholarship provides 850 euros in a monthly stipend. In addition, we offer you health and liability insurance. We offer you a travel stipend, and we offer you an annual study allowance, which is paid out at the beginning of each academic year and helps you cover material costs, books, things like that. Our deadline changes every year due to the calendar changing, but it's always in early November. So if you're interested in looking more into applying to this specific scholarship, just go to our website, daad.org, and you can find the 2021 deadlines. We also offer a study scholarship for artists and musicians, which may be of interest to some of you here. They are offered for the fields of fine art, design, visual communication, film, music, choreography, and architecture. So this is for essentially an MFA, though that system, the arts academies, have not 100% shifted to the Bologna process. So an MFA in Germany is called a Meisterschülerabschluss, and it's slightly different than what we know here in the States. That being said, the scholarship is for a master's degree or postgraduate degree in Germany in the arts. The support is available for 1 or 2 years of study. And again, we offer you the very same scholarship amount, 850 euros, health insurance, a travel stipend, and a one-off study allowance. Again, just check out our website for the specifics on the deadline. Here are some more online resources for study and research in Germany. Our website, of course, up at top. Our German headquarters website, which is available in German and English right below that. And then a number of these other sort of choose your own adventure websites that I was talking about earlier, where you really plug in your specific data and you see what programs are available to you. You can even choose for, I believe it's the studyingermany.de website. You can say, I only want to do a master's in English, and you'll see all of the results for master's programs in English that are available for you to apply to. Here is our contact information if you'd like to get in touch and schedule a one-on-one consultation with me or any of our program officers in New York or California. Our general email is daadny@daad.org. Our phone number, you can write down, but we're not in the office right now, so your best bet is to email us. And we're here to help you. We'd love to see you apply and pursue your graduate dreams in Germany. So be in touch if you're interested, and best of luck. Thank you so much. I will hand it over to the next presenter.
And that is Lewis, representing Education New Zealand.
Oh, thank you. Let me bring up my PowerPoint. Can everyone see that? Can I have a thumbs up or a head nod? Perfect. Thank you. So kia ora, everyone. Hello. Yes, my name's Lewis. I'm here to talk to you about education in New Zealand. Just before I start, I just wanted to make a brief note about COVID. So currently the border in New Zealand is closed to international travelers, except for some a few exceptions, and it will remain so for the foreseeable future. So kind of goes without saying, all the information that I'm going to give you today is for future planning purposes only. That being said, I hope you take a lot of information away with you. I have been given about 5 to 8 minutes to kind of pique your interest, and I'll put my email in the chat if you want to reach out to me afterwards. But I thought I'd start with this kind of why New Zealand. It's a question I get a lot over here. Not many people know much about New Zealand. So why New Zealand? Who are we? Where are we? All of the above. So here's a very quick kind of New Zealand 101 history lesson. But as you can see, New Zealand is a small South Pacific nation. We're located a few hours southeast of Australia. It's around a 12-hour direct flight from California, 12 hours from Chile, 12 hours from Shanghai. I often hear over here people referring to New Zealand as down under and being at the bottom of the world. But in my perspective, and if you take a look at this map, New Zealand is kind of at the center of the world, and we're in the thick of everything. New Zealand is a hugely multicultural place. There's large populations of Pacific people, particularly Polynesians, Asian people and European people, and the history of New Zealand, particularly its biculturalism and the relationship between the indigenous people and colonization is really interesting. So I'm sure most of you on the call are familiar with the movie Moana and are familiar with Maui. In New Zealand mythology, Maui fished New Zealand up out of the water. So there's two main islands in New Zealand. The bottom island is called Te Waipunami, that's Maui's boat. The top island is called Te Ika Maui, and it's the fish of Maui. He fished that island up out of the water, and that's where New Zealand came to be, and that's in Maori mythology. So Maori are Polynesian people who sailed across the Pacific. They arrived in New Zealand, similar to other great Pacific migrations across the region, and settled there. Years later, scores of Europeans started arriving. These were whalers and people leaving Australia, etc. And to cut a long story short, there was a treaty signed between Maori people and the British Crown, which led to New Zealand as we know it coming into being. In the late 1800s, there were again huge migrations of people from Asia, and particularly China. And in the last century, there's been massive migrations of Pacific people to New Zealand. And all this has led to New Zealand being a hugely multicultural country. So Auckland, which is our largest city in New Zealand, is actually the world's 4th most diverse city. Believe it or not, it's more diverse than Toronto, London, New York, and Los Angeles. So it's hugely diverse. Lots of people from all over the world living there. New Zealand is a very progressive country, and we're very proud of that. So way back in 1893, women won the right to vote in New Zealand, and it was actually a world first, and we're still proud. We're still talking about it today. And today, New Zealand's known for its friendly people, its open and welcoming culture, and its beautiful environment. But beyond all of those things, we're also lucky to have a fantastic education system. So we have 8 universities in New Zealand, and these are all ranked within the top 3% of universities worldwide, according to the QS World Rankings. New Zealand is also ranked the #1 English-speaking country in the world for preparing students for the future, according to the Economist Intelligence Unit. And our institutions are comprehensive, so you can pretty much study anything under the sun. Just a note, kind of touching on Corinne's experience. So New Zealand's education system is based on the UK's education system. So that means our undergraduate degrees are 3 years long. And it is much more focused on independent learning. We don't have just kind of one exam at the end of each semester like you might have in the UK, but you have much less assignments than you would have in the US, and more heavily weighted assignments or exams throughout the semester. So why would you do a New Zealand master's degree? So there's a few reasons or a few things that make a New Zealand master's degree attractive. So you can do in New Zealand between a 1 to 2 year master's program, a more traditional research-based master's, or a 1-year taught program. And if you do either of these programs, you can have work rights while you're in New Zealand. So if you do the traditional program, you can work full-time up to 40 hours during the week and during your holidays. If you do the 1-year program, you can work part-time up to 20 hours a week during the school year and full-time during the holidays. If you have a partner, a spouse, a husband, or a wife, they can come to New Zealand and you can sponsor their work visa so they can work full-time while you study. And if you guys happen to have any children, they can also come with you and enroll locally in local schools in New Zealand and pay domestic student fees. So it's very cheap. You're also eligible upon your graduation to stay in New Zealand for up to 3 years on a post-study work visa. And you can again work full-time in New Zealand, and if you want to live in New Zealand, keep working towards your residency through that. So the minimum entry requirement for an 18-month or a 2-year program in New Zealand is a 3-year bachelor's degree from a New Zealand institution or an overseas equivalent. So that would be your undergraduate degree in the States, provided that it's in a similar subject of study. You typically don't need to do GRE qualifications or anything like that to get into a New Zealand institution, and applications are done really easily. You apply online, there's no application fees. You apply directly to the institution online, and it's all simple and above board. You can get into a 1-year program if you have the equivalent to a postgraduate diploma or a bachelor's with honours, so if you're a really top student. And in New Zealand, you can pretty much study anything under the sun, so master's programs across the spectrum. Some of the ones that have been really popular for US students to study have been in environmental management, creative technologies, cybersecurity and business, etc. What else do I want to tell you? So tuition fees for a master's program, you're typically looking at between $25,000 to $35,000 US per year. But if you study your PhD in New Zealand, those numbers drop way down. So your PhD program, your application process is a little bit different. You would reach out to a lecturer who's in the field that you want to study in, contact them directly and work through that process. If you apply to do your PhD program in New Zealand, essentially they're looking for people who are going to contribute significantly to the field. So if you're really diligent, you really care about what you're studying in, there's a ton of interesting research programs going on in New Zealand that you should apply for. PhD programs, you have all the same work rights that you would on your master's program. You can bring your spouse with you, you can bring your children with you if you need to. You can apply for a 3-year post-study work visa. However, you pay domestic student fees. So you would pay New Zealand fees of $6,500 to $9,000 a year. Typically, and that with the exchange rate comes to about $4,000 to $6,000 per year for tuition. Your PhD programs in New Zealand are carried out similarly to how they would be in other studies. So you'd study for 3 to 4 years full-time, and then you would submit a thesis which would be marked, and there may also be an oral examination to test your knowledge of the subject area. Now I'm very aware that I'm running right up on my 8-minute time, so I'm going to flick through these slides. Normally I would go through and show you each, give you more information about each specific institution, but you can just take a look at the pictures. And as I said, I'm going to put my contact details on the bottom. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. More than happy to go into more detail at another time or put you in contact with New Zealand institutions. And I'll pass to the next speaker.
Thank you. And that is going to be Michael from the Graduate Institute in Geneva. So we're headed back to Europe now.
All right, hi. So I'm Michal from the Graduate Institute, and I'm going to share my screen. So I have a very long presentation, and hopefully I can hit right the few slides that I need to show you. So this is terrible being the last presenter, because now that I've listened to everyone else, I have like pages and pages of things that I really want to talk to you about. Before going into this presentation, I asked some of our prospective and current students what what they found challenging and what questions they would have had in a presentation like this. And a lot of what they said are the things that I would like to address, and that the other speakers have addressed as well. But everyone said exactly like Corinne said, understanding the academic culture. Actually, we didn't really expect it to be so different. Understanding how the programs are structured, lots of questions related to costs and so on. So hopefully we'll still have a few minutes left after I finish talking. I'll try to time myself tightly. So this slide so what I'm saying is that basically I have a lot to say. I'm going to try to give you just a few little nuggets of information, and then hopefully we can continue the conversation one-on-one or separately afterwards. So the Graduate Institute in Geneva, like I said, we are a very niche, very boutique kind of school because we're tiny. You can see that we have just under 1,000 students. And we only teach 5 disciplines in the social sciences that you will see in just a minute. Basically, international affairs is what we are all about. Our students come from all over the world. I like the slide because it really shows that you're not going to get a full immersion into Swiss culture if you come to the Graduate Institute, because between 12 and 15% of our students are actually local. What you will get if you come to our school is a full immersion into cross-culturalism. And I insist on this, and I'm starting what I'm saying with this point because it really defines us in many, many ways. Our classes are small, and 20 students per class, we consider that to be small. And the learning that takes place, we are not teaching chemistry and mathematics. We do not teach subjects that are universal and that unite people from all over the world around a formula, right? Or something that is undisputable. On the contrary, our students sit in the classroom and for days and days on end, they talk about their values and they talk about their opinions and they talk about their interpretations and their narratives and their histories and their beliefs. Very touchy, sensitive, personal subjects. And for many, many students, and for many people, we're so immersed in our own narratives, what we bring with us, to the study of politics or culture or whatever. And oftentimes the first time that we're confronted with something very radically different might be in that classroom. Right. And so we know that people in other countries think in different ways, but to actually have that come across in an academic way and in a personal way can be uncomfortable. And that discomfort is exactly where all the amazing learning happens. So if you want to come away with a multiplicity of viewpoints, with the ability to understand and have empathy for different points of view about world events, past and present, and project into the future. And if you want to be able to look at the world and really develop that geopolitical viewpoint, that geopolitical perspective, and therefore become an able, competent policymaker or researcher, or somebody who has that understanding, then we are the kind of school that you want to look at. We don't teach from any specific national or regional standpoint, right? So that's what we do. This is who we are, and it's very peculiar. I've already spent a good 4 minutes or whatever of my presentation, but that's really, really important. So just kind of zooming through my presentation, this is just a quick wrap up of the kind of topics that our research centers will focus on. So again, you can go back and look at the detailed. I'm just giving you a little bit of a sampler here. And I think this is the list of the disciplines that we teach. So you can see what kind of programs we have. We have the interdisciplinary program and the disciplinary programs, and they lead on to PhDs as well. These are 2-year programs, 3 semesters in the classroom, and the 4th semester typically spent doing a master thesis. So, comparing to what Corinne said and what Lewis said, we really, and also Casey about, the research and applied, we really have a mix. Our professors are from all over the world as well. And we really have a mix between the very kind of theoretical, deep foundations in the disciplines of each academic subject, and then small class tutorials, critical thinking, continuous assessments of lots of little grades that make up the final grade, and lots of different, a very large diversity of methods of assessment. So this is the kind of academic culture. Again, it's not homogeneous. It's not going to be the same from one class to another. And that's also something that our students need to kind of wrap their head around. Again, going to skip through a lot of these slides, and I want to get to the one that talks a little bit about Geneva. I'm going to try not to let my mouse slip so I can take you to that. A word about careers and outcomes, where students go after they graduate. Again, this is probably a little too small for you all to read on the screen now. When they graduate, our students tend to even out between the public sector, so government jobs and so on, sometimes representing their country at a multilateral level, or diplomatically, for example, in the international arena. The private sector, so economists work in banks and the consultancy firms and multinationals and so on. And what we group under the 3rd sector, which is the non-governmental organizations, startups, entrepreneurial associations, advocacy groups, nonprofits, et cetera, et cetera. And about 80% of our students tell us that they have found a job 4 to 6 months after graduation. So going to again try to find that slide about Geneva, because again, part of our identity and who we are is really really tied to the location where we are. So the Graduate Institute was founded in Geneva in 1927, and that was just 3 years after the League of Nations was founded in Geneva. So the League of Nations, after the First World War, this is the precursor of the United Nations. And we like to think that we are the academic side, the academic facet of that whole profession of international relations, of diplomats, of nation states learning to interact, learning to disagree, learning to do research and exchange opinions and advance world affairs if they can, and this was kind of new at the time, and we are still doing that very much today. So again, I'm not going to give you a lot about Swiss culture and history, but Switzerland is a neutral country, and that has its ups and downs. But one thing for sure is that we really are providing still today a place, a forum for safe discussion and free discussion of different opinions, different viewpoints. We organize more than 400 different conferences and events every year, for example, with a lot of leaders, thinkers, opinion leaders and researchers. I have no idea how I'm doing on time, because now that I'm sharing my screen, I don't have my clock there. So April, if maybe you can give me a thumbs up or down and in the middle.
We're at about 8 minutes right now.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to pretty much stop. I want to give you 2 very practical things. The cost, because I know that's really important to everyone, our tuition is 8K per year, 8,000 per year is our tuition. And the cost of living in Geneva right now is estimated at about 20,000 per year, to give you a ballpark. And we do have some financial aid options available. And our applications open every year in October, and they remain open until pretty much the 15th of January. A little bit later for late applications, but then the date to keep in mind is 15th of January for the intake of the following fall, if that makes sense. And we only have one intake per year. I really want to talk about the experience of going overseas and that cross-cultural experience that Corinne mentioned so aptly. And you know, nobody talked about these things when I was an international student many years ago. But today you can, you know, Google the word, you know, cross-cultural, transcultural, study abroad, and have lots of research and literature. And I think, like Corinne said, this is a very unique opportunity. When you study overseas, you go to a different culture, you come back a changed person, hopefully for the best. The more you can prepare, nothing can prepare you for the surprises and the actual experience of this immersive experience, but you can anticipate a few things. And a little bit like what happens in our classrooms, sometimes the learning is in the discomfort. And if you can be open to that, then I think you can really maximize on this amazing opportunity. I'm going to stop talking and hopefully leave a little bit of time for questions.
That's a lot of information. Thank you all so much. I think we will open it now up to questions. It'd be really great if folks could type their questions into the box, and I will ask a question while people are doing that, which is what, for our panelists, do you think the biggest challenge is when applying to graduate school abroad?
So that's open for anyone, did you say?
Open for anyone to jump in.
Sure. I'll talk about some brief challenges for us. One challenge that students find is the timing. So New Zealand is in the southern hemisphere, which means your seasons are flipped. So our academic year runs from kind of February, March through to November. And then we have our summer holidays over December and January, and that can kind of trip people up when they're applying. The application timelines are a little bit different. I'm sure there's other challenges that'll come to me, but I'll give someone else a chance to answer that.
If I may jump in, because I'm in the, because I just spoke, and then I'll let somebody else. But I think studying abroad is a big step. It's a big step for individuals and sometimes for families. You know, it's a big decision. And it's a bit of a risk, right? So, you know, it's an expense and it's a couple of years of your life, and you're pretty much taking a leap into the unknown, because in most cases, you know, you don't know the culture, the language of the school, the country, etc. I mean, that's the whole point, right, of studying abroad. And I think for a lot of students, the challenge is in, you know, weighing up, do you have enough information to make an informed decision, to calculate that risk, as it were? And it's going to be different for everyone. You know, some people it'll be more emotional, for other people it'll be more on the financial side or the academic. What is this going to do for my career? And so I think it's really a question of using all of the resources that you have. You know, Casey gave a lot of websites, for example, for information about studying in Germany. So using all of that information to kind of fill in the blanks, and then, you know, really asking the question, am I ready? There's always going to be a discrepancy, like Corinne described, between my expectations and what I'm going to find. And it's true that, for example, in most European countries, the expectation is that students will be a lot more independent than they are in the US or in maybe Anglo-Saxon cultures in general. So you're not going to find perhaps the same level and the same commitment to student welfare and services, etc. And, you know, that can come as a difficulty for some students. But again, the more information you have about those differences and what you might expect, the more I think the more I think you can minimize the difficulty in those things.
Thank you very much. There is a question that I think I'd like to address to Corinne, which is maybe she's already seen this. US institutions are usually very personal and there's a lot of interaction between students and professors. And Gabriella said she's heard it's pretty impersonal in most parts of the world and professors aren't as accessible. So how did you connect with your faculty abroad? Was it a different experience? How did you find it?
Yeah, so this is part of what I was speaking to about the more independent learning. It is definitely a different experience trying to connect with faculty, and there's a couple of reasons for that. I'll speak from the UK perspective. One, in the UK, unlike the US, a lot of faculty are paid hourly. So they're given a number of hours they're allowed to work at the institution a week, and that's it. And that's what they have to spread across all their students. So once I learned that, it made a lot of sense as to why I wasn't getting as much attention as I might have been used to, even though I wasn't a big attention seeker in any way, shape, or form. The second is the cultural difference. In the UK. In the UK, people are not as welcoming. I've taken a number of UK friends back to the US. One got very freaked out that I had a conversation with a random person in Starbucks, and he couldn't understand why. She was wearing a Mount Holyoke sweatshirt. This is why. Just gonna put that out there. And so I think the person that you're going to get the largest connection with is whoever is going to be the advisor for your thesis or dissertation. And so who you pick as that person is incredibly important. And they are going to be your biggest connection to the institution and your biggest connection to your academic world there. The other professors or lecturers you have, they'll come and go based on whatever you're doing, but that's the person who's going to stand by you. So fomenting that relationship is very important. And you can do that. And as Lewis was saying, in New Zealand, it's the same in the UK. You need to make those relationships before you even arrive. So go into almost every single university has a directory that lists staff and what they're studying, what they've published, what they're interested in. Go into that. Find someone who's interested in what you're interested in and send them an email and say, hey, I'm looking at coming to this institution. I'd love to speak to you more about that. And creating those relationships ahead of time will benefit you.
Couples, you know,
benefit you. That was my end of what I was going to say. So
great, thank you. And there is another question here, sort of a chicken and the egg question. Do you figure out the funding before you apply, or do you apply first and then see how the funding works out?
I'll just say oh, go ahead, Casey.
Yeah, I can answer from an institutional level from the DAAD. I mean, on a personal level, I can't tell you the answer to that. It's up to you whether you're willing to front the costs out of your personal budget and you just want to get that degree, regardless of whether you're going to get a scholarship or not. That's your personal decision. The way DAAD works is when you write your application, our deadline actually is before the German university deadline for the semester you would be funded for through DAAD. So you write your personal statement for the application, specifying which program ideally you would like to go to. You then hear back from us about whether or not you've gotten the funding before you apply. And let's say you receive a DAAD scholarship and then you apply to that program you want to go to and you don't get in. You can still get the DAAD funding. You just need to apply to a backup program. Write us a letter justifying why that backup program is just as good for your objective, and also say that you didn't get in. So you can speak to our program officer specifically to work out the sort of stickiness within those timelines, because they don't really overlap, yet they are so interdependent. But personally, it's really your own financial situation that should lead you to decide what you want to do. Yeah, thank you.
I will say that many countries, if you are a U.S. citizen, will take, you can apply for funding loans from the U.S. government, and that may be similar depending on your own, if you're not a U.S. citizen, from your country of citizenship. But it is an important question to ask. And are there other funding mechanisms where you're going? such as teaching assistantships or things like that, that might defray some of the costs while you're there. Those are all very good questions to ask, things that you would ask if you were studying in your home country or in the US. Ask those things about abroad. Does the European country in which you're getting a degree from make a difference in the long run? I think this really depends. I'm gonna leave this to some of our folks who are located in Europe, though.
I'm going to say it doesn't matter. Go where you want to go. Go where you find interest and where you think you're going to benefit. No one cares if your degree is from Russia, from the UK, from Germany, from Switzerland, or from Austria. Wherever you want to go. It depends on the institution itself, not its location.
I would also say that it really depends on who you are, and in addition to that, what your field is. You know, if you are pursuing a degree in chemical engineering, you know, you might want to choose Germany over Luxembourg because there's not really great chemical engineering opportunities in Luxembourg. So you might want to really do a compare and contrast mind map once you've decided what your field is. And that can sort of answer your question too, and look at like the bigger players in the field, in addition to what Corinne said, you know, of going where you want to go, where you want to learn the language and experience the culture and experience the way that they live and work. Thank you.
Are there quotas on the number of international students? Are international applicants in the same pool as domestic students, or, and I imagine this would be different in different places, but if we could get some answers on that one.
In Switzerland, there are no quotas, and at the Graduate Institute, we do not use nationality as a criterion in the admission process. So it's the same, which drives our Swiss students a little bit crazy. It's hard for them to understand, but yeah, that's the way it is. There's another question there about visas. Yes, it can happen that a visa is denied, a visa request. Now you can only begin the visa application process after you have been admitted, right? So first you have to be admitted, then with your admission letter, you go to the consulate or whatever, and you start your visa process. So you can't predict this in advance. And in all my years, 20 odd years of working in this field in Switzerland with international students, I have seen a couple of cases maybe of visas get denied. The schools do not make the visa decisions, the immigration authorities do, and we have absolutely no control over that. So, you know, are some countries more difficult? Yes. Did something come up in the student background check? I have no idea. Why do they deny a visa? I mean, there can be a number of reasons. Sometimes we know and sometimes we don't. So it's a possibility, but a very, very, very distant one. So that definitely should not stop you.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Visa application rates for US students to New Zealand, it's something like 99% of all applications are accepted. So it's very, very unlikely, but there are cases where your visa application might be rejected.
And then if we have time for one more question, which is when applying to a master's or PhD program, are you admitted to a specific department and then you specialize, or are you applying to a specific program?
For New Zealand, it's a specific program.
I think that's across the board. When you're doing your master's or doctoral degrees, you really are focusing and specializing, and you really, when you're applying, you're having to explain why you're wanting to do that. So you're going to have a good plan developed as you're applying.
In the UK, you actually have to submit a proposal of what your thesis will be. You don't have to stick to it, but you do have to submit one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just say for Germany, it's a very specific application process, and sometimes to a fault. in the United States, it's very normal to do an undergraduate in cultural anthropology and then decide after 2 years of working outside of academia to do a master's in English literature. In Germany, that's really not the case. And so often you will not be accepted into a master's program if your bachelor's degree was not in the exact same field. Now, there are ways to sort of move diagonally, and DAAD can help you and give you tips on how to do that. But generally speaking, it's much harder to apply in a very zoomed out way. They're looking for ultra specificity in your application for your field of study.
There's also a question about whether the colleges or programs prefer students who plan to stay in the country after graduation.
Don't know about anyone else, but for New Zealand, I don't think institutions.
No,
Not a
typically,
consideration.
you know, your visa for studying there will be for studying, and after you receive your degree, typically that is over, or there's a grace period where you can work for a specific period of time because you earned your degree there. It varies from country to country, but your purpose for being there is to be a student, and your visa will be issued accordingly.
I would just add a little nuance to that. What might be important is not to know where you want to be in which country, but just to see that you have some idea of what you want to do with this degree afterwards. So like, for example, we don't expect students to have everything mapped out down to all the details, right? I mean, you know, hopefully we can still impact your young minds enough that, you know, the world is your oyster and you have lots of different choices and you're allowed to change your mind a million times. But it is important to see that in like your motivation to come to this school to do this program here and not another one, you know, this is going to serve some purpose for you, and you have some notion of what that aspiration is. And that does need to shine through a little bit in what we call a letter of motivation. Other universities might call it an essay or a statement of purpose or whatever. But I think it is important to see that because you're coming to graduate school, so we do expect there to be some notion of the next step.
And I know that Lewis has to leave. I think we're gonna try to take one more question and then we'll wrap it up. I think this has been hugely helpful. Thank you so much. And the last question that I'm going to put out there is sort of, I guess, non-traditional adult students. Are they competitive for the program and not just recent graduates from undergraduate degrees?
So for DAAD's scholarship funding opportunities, there are age limitations. You cannot go beyond a certain number of years after your bachelor's degree when you apply. So that's DAAD specific. But speaking about German universities, the application process is really not as personalized as it is in the United States. So there's no personal statement. There's no real narrative of emotion and drive. It's just your transcripts. And so what that does do is really open up who can apply and who can be admitted. German universities do not care how old you are when you come to do your degree. In fact, many German students, typical university students, are much older than US American university students. And if you're an adult applying for, and by adult, I guess you don't mean legally above 18, but like somebody in their 30s, and you want to do a master's degree, no problem. A German university takes no issue with that. And they don't really know who you are in your application. So that works to your benefit in that sense. They're really not cutting you off at any age. Any age is welcome to come study at a German university, which I think is really great.
Yeah, I'll say that as well. When I did my master's, it was in a performing arts, so naturally people tended to be younger because dancers tend to be younger. But I was far from the youngest person there. I was also far from the oldest person there. And I will say, doing my doctorate right now at UCL, I am the youngest person in the program. by far. Most of the people who are on my program are in their late 30s or early 40s. So age definitely is never a limitation.
Well, thank you so much to all of our panelists. I think we have some really great information here and food for thought. And you know how to find them. Each of the panelists here, they're listed as exhibitors on the website on our SCED page for this event. And I think they've also dropped in their information into the chat, or will do so now. So feel free to ask them questions and email them. Thank you very much for your time and for sharing your knowledge and experience.